name is Cindy. I am 33 years old. What my path... Oh my God, I feel so frozen. Sound like I'm talking to a friend. Starting a YouTube channel and talking to a camera and talking about my story is really difficult for me. It is a difficult thing to be perceived and for other people to, pick apart your story or experiences. But I do think that I have a perspective to offer that maybe people haven't heard before. So here we fucking go. This is a general trigger warning about my entire story. There might be things that I discuss that are hard for some to listen to. I was so invested in being a member of the LDS Church. I truly never let myself genuinely question until I was about 30 years old. For a little bit of context, my first memory being alive was being sexually abused. It was as early as age 5 and went on for a couple years, so until I was about 7. When that happens, when you are so young, your brain cannot even process that you are in danger. It was just normal for me. I had no concept that what this family member was doing to me and asking me to do to them was wrong. I had no concept of it affecting me in a negative way. That set the stage for the rest of my life and how I would just approach who I wanted to be and how I could find safety. It affected literally everything. In high school and then as I went into college, I started realizing that I could be accepted by, this large group of people, this community, if I behaved and acted a certain way, did certain things, that would provide me safety and acceptance. Because I didn't feel safe in my own body. I had no sense of self-worth. I didn't know how to rely upon myself for making my own life decisions. And I had no one to guide me. I was one of 11 children. We were, on the surface, were the epitome of like a Mormon success story. My dad was an extremely successful attorney. My mother was beautiful and thin and gorgeous. On the outside, we have these two parents and then these 11 children. They're doing the things that Mormons are supposed to be doing. And at home, I felt so lonely and I just felt truly so alone my entire childhood. I was provided for monetarily. I never had to worry about food on the table or clothes, but I did not receive emotional support whatsoever. Our faith wasn't really discussed a lot in our family growing up, but it was like it was more you're expected to fall into line. We will do scripture study every night. We'll do family home meeting. We're going to tick the boxes, and you are expected to live your life in this way. You're expected to be a successful Mormon. But then kind of navigating if we had doubts or questions or just even encouraging our individual faith journeys, it didn't happen. I started really latching on to my faith. And my faith really, truly did get me through some really difficult times. And then I eventually decided to go on a mission. I came home, got married. Fast forward to 2017, and it was around the time of the Me Too movement. I started having very vivid flashbacks of my childhood abuse. and the ins and outs of how my abuse was found out about, how it was covered up, how I never received any sort of help after it was found out about. I can go into more detail about that specifically another time. I was reading these stories of all of these women, and I started thinking to myself, oh wow, like I've been sexually abused. I also, me too. And it was really hard because I had gaslit myself up until that point that that didn't happen, or it was just something that I had to accept. It was a secret that I had to keep forever. So all these memories start coming back to my mind, and that kind of festers for a couple of years. At the end of 2019, my older sister, Carly, she is one of my very best friends. She is the sibling that I am absolutely closest to. We've always just had this really close bond. At the end of 2019, when she started to question the church and then eventually leave, my entire world shattered. It was absolutely devastating to me. I, at that point, I had seen other people leave the church. I had seen people, stray or fall off the deep end, or as people like to say about people that leave the church, but never someone that close to me. That deeply affected me. And at the exact same time, and I don't believe this is a coincidence, I believe it was right before she had officially told me that she was leaving the church, I had started to really commit to going to therapy every single week to process my childhood abuse and to figure out what was going on with my mental health, why I just constantly struggled, why it just felt like my brain was split in so many different directions, which it literally was and still is. And everything to do with my mental health surrounds me trying to put those pieces back together and become a whole person. So both those things combined, Carly leaving and then me starting to go to therapy, I started to really think for myself for the very first time in my entire life. I started to become more of an individual. I started genuinely questioning these beliefs that I was so hell-bent on protecting and acting according to what a perfect Mormon woman looks like. I was a stay-at-home mother. I supported my husband while he went to work. I wore my garments every single day. I was militant about attending the temple every weekend. I freaked out that we were going to miss out on blessings, and I took copious notes during journal. I was just so deeply in it. So for me to genuinely start questioning, it was a huge, huge deal. When all of this was happening, 2019, very beginning of 2020, I started meeting with my bishop every single week and just talking with him about the doubts that I was starting to have. And bless this bishop because he was very supportive and very, I would say, unconventional in his approach to me having these doubts. And he even suggested that I look up John Dehlin and his podcast and look up about mixed faith marriages when one person believes and the other doesn't, because that played a huge part in my journey. Is just I'm married and this would affect our entire family. This would change everything. The basis of my relationship with my husband was the church. We met as missionaries, and I was so militant about just everything having to do with the gospel. It was time to renew my temple recommend. I went into my temple recommend interview, and it was like the first time that I was like really honest in answering questions, and I did not renew my recommend. And that felt like that was kind of the first physical, tangible sign that I was going to be moving away from the Mormon church. And that was so, so difficult for me as someone that just believed with everything that this was the true church, that I needed to be a disciple of Christ. I needed to be a certain type of Mormon woman in order to be successful and seen as valuable. 2020, obviously, we all know the world shut down. We stopped attending church in the physical building, but we would listen to it every Sunday, live stream. It allowed me to more easily detach myself from this cult. It is a cult. Everything came to a head in the summer of 2021. I had been in therapy for about a year and a half and really getting into the nitty-gritty details of everything, and being diagnosed with complex PTSD, being diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. I was falling apart, but a very necessary falling apart. My mental health just continued to get worse and worse, to the point of me relying on old coping mechanisms that I did when I was in high school. Going back around August of 2020, I started a mental health Instagram account where I started talking very vaguely about my childhood abuse and me starting therapy and discovering all these things about myself. And thank God I started that account, because this girl, she started following my page. She messaged me one day and just said, hey, something like, I love your account. I love your content. I experienced something very similar in childhood, and I went to a treatment center for it. And she kind of just sent this very brief message. The second I saw that, I thought, I need to do that. I need to go to treatment. It was very similar actually to when I knew I was going to go on a mission for the LDS church. It was just like this huge light bulb moment. And I just thought, I'm going to do that. I need to do that. And then we started talking more. She sent me recommendations for rehab centers. And within about, I think, 2 weeks from that initial message, I was on a flight to Arizona to go to a rehab center. I left my husband and 2 very young daughters, and I was there for 42 days. When I went in to the treatment center, I wasn't sure what I was going to do about being a member of the church. This incredible woman who contacted me and gave and helped me eventually get to the treatment center, something that she said I held so tightly to was that I needed to use this time being in treatment to legitimately fall apart. This was the place for me to completely fall apart and to then start putting myself back together again. And so that is exactly what I did. I genuinely fell apart. Like, my soul was just, I felt like it was extracted from my body, and it just felt like I was just kind of floating for a little bit, because I didn't know why my brain was the way that it was. And the first day that I met with my therapist in treatment, she said to me, Cindy, you need, because I had expressed to her, the things that I kind of came into treatment for. I talked about my childhood abuse, but I also mention to her, you know, I'm also struggling with my faith. I don't know if I want to remain Mormon. And funnily enough, my therapist was a member of the church. She was a convert. But she just said to me, Cindy, you need to put that on a shelf while you're here. Until you can figure out you and the core of who you are, then you can approach that again. But you need to put that on a shelf because that comes secondary to just you existing as a human being in this world. So I did that. I put it on a shelf, and of course, like, it came up during therapy and during all the things that I did in treatment, because Mormonism was so ingrained in every part of my life. Of course, it came up, but I didn't focus on it. And then eventually, all of my concerns about leaving the church just melted away. Because here I was in a treatment center in another state from where I primarily lived, and I was surrounded by hundreds of people, where I was put into group therapy, individual therapy, workshops, just activities, and I was having the most incredible experiences, incredible realizations about myself. I started to feel so full from other people's stories and us healing together. And I realized no one here is talking about God, really. There's elements of it in the AA program, obviously, but that wasn't part of my track during treatment. But I wasn't, nobody was talking about God. Nobody was reading the Book of Mormon. Nobody was, we weren't praying together. We weren't singing hymns together. We weren't taking the sacrament. And these people accepted me and liked me as a person, just as a person. They didn't give a fuck if I was Mormon or not. And I loved them, and they weren't Mormon. And it just melted away, because it was the first time that I realized, oh, I can just exist in this world just as myself. No, I don't have to be Mormon. I can exist in this world. There's so many people out there that I have yet to meet, and being a member of the church just really closed off my heart and my mind to people that were not going to perpetuate my desire to be a perfect Mormon. And consequently, through everything that I was learning about myself and all of the healing that was taking place, and looking back, it definitely, my healing really kind of, going to treatment catapulted me on this journey of healing. But really, it just opened up so many wounds to the point where I had so much rage inside of me that I have been forcing myself to be this person that I am not. My decision to walk away from the church was not based on church history. Of course, I had heard, things here and there about the history, the really fucked up history. But my decision to leave was completely emotional. I realized that it was too much. Being a part of the Mormon church was too much for my brain to handle. And my mental illnesses manifested through intense scrupulosity, which is religious and moral OCD. I realized that I needed to just love who I was as a human being and move away from forcing myself to love that I was a Mormon and I was wearing my garments and doing the right things and I was righteous. Instead, I felt this huge, huge push to just focus on me and my identity completely outside of Mormonism. When I came home from treatment, my husband and I separated and I stopped attending the church, and I feel like if I hadn't gone away for those 42 days, that it would have taken me a lot longer to truly leave. and to cut those ties with the LDS church, because it was the first time when just my brain, yes, it was opened up, but it was also quiet. You know, I didn't have my cell phone. We had like I think 45 minutes of media time every day, but that was it. I didn't have my husband, my children. I didn't have my family members, my congregation. Um, I didn't, I was completely away from everything and everyone that I knew. And I got to decide who I wanted to be. I could be anyone I wanted to there. And I realized I loved the person that I was there. And it had nothing to do with me being an active member of the church. So when I came home, I just never went back. I never went back. I never wrestled with it again. I knew that I had to leave, and I had to save myself from this environment that was exacerbating all of my mental illnesses. It's wild for me to think back on myself as a Mormon, because when I look at pictures of myself, I just feel like there's someone trapped in that scared little girl. Like there's somebody trapped in there that's just waiting to come out. Because how I feel and even just look now is so different than when I was in the church. There's so much more light to my face. I feel so much more full. My relationships are deeper and more meaningful and genuine. And I feel like I just was never supposed to be a part of that forever. And it's truly a miracle to me that I got out. It is an absolute miracle. A miracle, but also I worked so fucking hard to make sure that that is exactly what I needed to do. Everyone's decision to leave the church is so incredibly personal and specific to that person and their upbringing and the environment that they lived in, the place that they live in. Life is still really hard. There's been so many things that have happened since I came home from treatment, got a divorce, left the church. So many life events that have been incredibly difficult. Leaving the church didn't mean that all of my problems were solved and I didn't have to face anything difficult anymore. It actually meant that I had to face them even more, but it felt like something difficult to do that I really wanted to do. It felt like a difficult path that I really wanted to be on, and I felt was going to bring me greater peace and just general understanding of myself. I like the phrase, choose your heart. It's very cheesy. You'd probably find it on Pinterest, but I knew that staying married and staying in the LDS church would be hard. And I knew that leaving both of those things would be hard. Both things would be difficult. And so I chose one of those difficult paths. And I'm so grateful that I did. I feel alive. I feel like I have so much to offer the world. I have so much to offer my daughters. I definitely have ups and downs. My mental illnesses are difficult for me. They make relationships difficult. They make just everyday routines difficult. But I am free from having this omniscient, vague God controlling my every thought and decision. I don't have to worry about this kind of big brother type character that was just constantly in my head that I had to, oh, no, you can't question, you can't do that. Like, you've got to stay in this little box that men have created for you. You need to stay in there. You need to stuff down your emotions. You need to suppress them and just understand that everything's going to work out in the next life. Your questions will be answered. You might not get them answered now. Just stay in this little box. You're safe. You're going to be okay. And when I busted open the the top of that box and like kicked in the sides and unearthed my entire being, my entire soul, my entire physical body, it was both exhilarating and overwhelming. But I'm so glad to be at this point. I'm so glad that I do not have to raise my daughters in this fucked up institution. I'm so grateful for that. I really appreciate you listening to my story. This is so weird to say. Please like this video, comment on it, subscribe to my channel so that I don't have to work a 9-to-5 office job and I can do what I truly love to do, which is creating content and sharing about my life and my story. And I want to share so much more, and I want to be paid to do it. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.